Hello, I am just some ghoul, and this is my channel, and today I'm going to talk about how my anxiety affected me while I traveled around Japan. I will obviously preface this video by saying that anxiety affects everyone differently, individually. How I react to something won't be how you react to something, even if we both have anxiety over the same general kinds of things. So take this story time with a little bit of salt. I won't be going over the flight anxiety of traveling internationally. That's just not great, no matter where I went, and the other passengers sure didn't help the situation, but I'm here to talk about Japan specifically. For some of you that know me kind of well, and the amount of uh, feels that I get about things and overwhelm. You might be wondering, how did I handle being in such a populated city environment when big buildings give me claustrophobia and lots of people give me existential dread? And I just generally have anxiety functioning in new environments. So, you know, how did that go for me? And I am honestly happy to report that being in Japan felt really good. I'm generally hesitant to leave my house in my own hometown where I grew up for a variety of reasons, but suffice to say, going out is just generally really draining for me, and usually I'd rather not. The few times that I go to slightly larger cities in the surrounding areas is even more draining. But Japan? Aside from getting around in Tokyo Station on arrival, everything was so calming. It felt more ordered. It felt safer, I guess. I don't want to sound like I'm perpetuating a stereotype, but I genuinely felt like so much less stress in Japan than I'd ever had traveling before, Canada being my only reference, and you know the stereotype about us. All the public functions in Japan work like clockwork. All the service workers aren't bitter about their jobs or angry if you genuinely ever need to ask for help. And all the people are considerate, quiet, they give each other space, as long as it's not rush hour on the subway. I was never afraid that someone was going to, harm me for absolutely no reason. Like, I'll get hit by a car when I'm crossing the street when it's my turn to walk. When they do honk in Japan, it's more to, acknowledge each other, not because they're full of road rage. The functionality of Japan counteracted all the anxiety I usually get in big cities, surrounded by lots of other people. My partner was concerned for my well-being going to Japan, us both being very aware of the population density. He's taken me to Toronto before, and I had a panic attack from overstimulation. I didn't vibe well there. And I wasn't acknowledging it because I wasn't being triggered, but at the end of most days, my partner would comment on how well I did going on the subway and navigating large crowds and how proud he was of me. We both kind of expected Japan to be too much for me, but it was actually totally fine. And I don't know how that might manifest in other people's anxieties, but it was really interesting and definitely worth mentioning that the whole time I was in Japan, I wasn't anxious, at least not in those ways. Social anxiety still came into play, but not quite the same as usual where I feel bad about being stupid, but I did feel like a major inconvenience sometimes. Me and my travel buddy knew some basic Japanese phrases, and he's okay at reading hiragana, but had never practiced having conversations with other people. This knowledge proved to be absolutely worthless to the both of us, because the actual use of those phrases by native Japan speakers was so quick that it was basically unrecognizable to us. My first several attempts buying things, I stumbled through even saying arigato gozaimasu, which is pretty much the only thing I had to say. But they said that phrase, and sometimes more, in a single breath. I went into stores hoping that I could at least discern the word fuguro to know when they were about to ask me if I wanted a bag, and it was just so fast that I usually blanked. I resorted to nodding more often than not because my brain couldn't work fast enough to even remember to sputter out "Daijobu desu." So yeah, my whole trip involved a lot of pointing and nodding and trying to go off context clues because any hopes I had of picking up phrases being spoken to me in the moment were totally lost. I've been a service worker. I know what it's like to blow through a phrase that you have to say 100 times a day so fast that they kind of stop being individual words. I'm just saying that if you don't actually practice Japanese, you're probably going to flounder once you get there, even if you know most of the general phrases that you should know and can say them at your own very, very slow pace, but not at the pace that everybody else is going to be using. There is no casual introduction to interacting with native Japan speakers, unfortunately. Our first 5 days in Japan were in Tokyo, the most tourist-friendly area there is, and our anxiety of having to order and not be misunderstood prevented us from eating out until the very last day. I actually got really bummed about it because I knew that anywhere else that we went was only going to be harder and more stressful to order from because they're probably not going to be as fluent with English being around tourists so often. And if we didn't break the seal before leaving Tokyo, it was going to set a bad precedent for the rest of the trip. So I forced the situation on our last day in Tokyo, and when I saw a ramen shop with a ticket machine outside that had empty seats inside, I steered us over and I made us get some. I love ticket machines, and I am so grateful that they are available in Japan. I hope that all restaurants eventually upgrade to incorporate like tablet ordering into their system. It's not necessarily that I wanted to take out the person interaction. It's that there's no room for miscommunication when you're plugging in your order, you know? In one of my previous jobs, it was the worst when we would have one of the promotion sales and I would have to ask people, do you want the pepperoni stuffed crust? And they'll be like, yes, I want a pepperoni stuffed crust. I'm like, no, do you want the pepperoni stuffed crust with pepperoni in the stuffed crust also, or just one with, or just a pepperoni stuffed crust with no pepperoni in it? And it's just a nightmare. So yeah, if you have social anxiety, if you ever get prevented from doing things because you feel like a burden, eating out in Japan might prove to be a bit of a struggle for you. We definitely ended up skipping lunches because we were usually in busy areas like Shinjuku or Akihabara around afternoon, and everywhere would be full of seating, and we were both too awkward to navigate waiting and ordering, and where to go and what to do once we did order, being in other customers' way, holding up the flow of traffic because we take too long to eat, you know, etc., etc. And unfortunately, as I talked about in another video, ordering food online wasn't always an option either. The websites for a lot of Japanese businesses, both restaurants and hotels, aren't designed to allow pickup pre-orders for foreigners, requiring either a zip code or a verified Japanese phone number. That said, don't worry because Uber Eats is a pretty big thing there, if online ordering is a crutch that you feel like you're going to need. We definitely leaned on it a few times. The caveat to that, though, is that relying on Uber Eats does narrow down your selection. All the best, most authentic options probably aren't on there. Ordering in person gave me the sweats, no matter when or where we ordered, but I do hope to ease your mind by saying that the staff in Japan, everywhere, they were always so nice and so patient. Our first attempt at ordering food to go from a restaurant itself, we we absolutely butchered the interaction. It was a little yakisoba and okonomiyaki place with two staff, both of whom didn't speak a lick of English. We didn't have a problem picking our food so much as organizing a pickup time after the fact. As it turns out, Google Translate seemed a lot better at translating Japanese to English than from English to Japanese. But anyway, the situation devolved into passing our phone app around to confirm everything. Of course, this would have been way easier if we called them to arrange a pickup, but for that, we clearly weren't fluent enough to hold a conversation, and also didn't have a phone for calling, so the point is, if this situation were flipped, if we went into a North American restaurant and couldn't speak the primary language, we would not be met with the same level of kindness as we were in Japan. In North America, the workers would certainly be annoyed, if not downright hostile to us, so I cannot stress enough just how accommodating Japan service workers were. Even if you are anxious and worried about being an inconvenience, the general mentality over there is to want to provide the best service that they can. They're not looking at you like a burden ruining their entire day. They're just sincerely trying to get you what you want. It's a pity there's no tipping culture in Japan because everywhere that I ate, I really, really wanted to. And I'm a cheap bitch, if you know anything about me by now. So, what have we learned from this story time session? 1, there's lots of ticket machines to order places if you have anxiety about fudging up what you want. 2, there's Uber Eats if you desire delivery or pickup regardless, but you can order some things online, but mostly only through a third-party app. And 3, Japanese people are generally very sweet and helpful, so don't feel intimidated about needing a little extra assistance. So yeah, that's how my anxiety played out while I was in Japan, if any of you were curious. I'm sure I'll have another oddly specific story time soon enough, and until then, I'll see you in that video. Bye bye.